Okay. Well, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you all for being here with Pipelines to Possibilities for our latest installment of the Black Table Talk. I am Khalid White, one of the Pipelines to Possibilities members. So glad that you are here. I'm a faculty of African American Studies and Ethnic Studies. And for those who are not familiar with Pipelines to Possibilities, we are a program powered by the California Community College Chancellor's Office, but also powered by the Chancellor's Office Vision for Success. And so we are here to not only change the face of academia, but to also address some of the issues, concerns, and also some of the positives of being a faculty of color, and particularly a Black faculty member and Black scholar practitioner in our community college system. I have the unique pleasure of being able to work with some of the best and the brightest in the state of California. And one of those individuals happens to be Dr. Sasha Knox.
Good afternoon, everyone. My title precedes me, but thank you. Just Sasha in this space. I look forward to sharing the space with you as part of a P2P member. We really just want to elevate some voices that we don't generally hear from and talk about some topics that we don't normally discuss. So I'm really excited today, as May is Mental Health Awareness Month, to really just talk about mental health from a Black lens, from a unique perspective. And we have some scholar and all-star panelists that will really just shed light on this very critical month for us. We also are joined with Helen Young, Dr. Helen Young, newly minted Dr. Helen Young. Are you able to just say a quick hello to the people?
I am. Hey, everybody from Houston, Texas, where I am spending time with my two amazing sons, adult sons, and my granddaughter for a few weeks. So I wouldn't have missed signing on and just welcoming you to this space. As Sasha and Khalid said, it is so important for us to elevate our voices as Black faculty in this sometimes very tough system that we work in. But why do we do it? We do it because we love our students. And so I'm super excited to hear this talk today. I apologize, background noise. I may actually sign off and listen to the recording later so that I'm not a disturb, so I can really enjoy it. We love you guys. Thank you, panelists, for being here with us today. Your voices and what you're sharing today is so valuable to us and just so important. We cannot convey that enough. Black faculty must take center stage in the work that we do. And we know that begins with our mental health. So we love you, thank you, and knock it out the park.
Thank you, Dr. Young. And last but not least, our esteemed Pipelines to Possibilities brains behind the operation, Dorinda Bryant.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to have you join us, be here sit with us in this space and share it with you. We are very blessed to be able to share this space with you. As we've been saying, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are on a quest to give a new perspective and a new light from a faculty perspective and what that really means. And so we're excited to have you here and to elevate your voice. And I'm so happy to be a part of Pipelines to Possibilities, where I get to do everything that I love, literally. So in light of that, I hope that this space, that you're able to be comfortable and be real, so that we can move it on to other people and get it in front of other eyes who will share the same opinions. And so thank you so much for being here and for your honesty in being here today.
Excellent. Thank you, Dorinda. And thank you to our esteemed panelists. We've gone through, the Pipelines to Possibilities group, us four. We want to give the panelists a chance to give themselves a brief introduction and let the audience know who they are and what they do, their expertise. And the first person I see on my screen is Mercedes Tiggs, one of our esteemed panelists. Good afternoon, Mercedes.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor and a pleasure. Thank you all for having me. I'm Mercedes Tiggs. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am the founder and CEO of 816 Culinary Therapy. It's a non-traditional way of therapy where we use mindfulness food preparation to really promote emotional, physical, and mental well-being. Thanks for having me here today.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for being here, Mercedes. The next person I see is Kendrick Dial, our next panelist.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Kendrick Dial. I am an artist. I'm a social worker by training. I make my living as a trainer and a coach, executive coach and a DEI coach as well, working primarily with social service organizations and educational branches as well. And I'm an artist, and I lean into that by fusing the worlds of social justice and mental health with the arts. So I do music, compose, produce, songwriter, lyricist, etc. Happy to be here.
All right, thank you. Renaissance man, all right. And last but not least, our esteemed panelist, Dr. Aaron Charlins. We know that Aaron is a staple and a powerhouse in the California Community College system. So Aaron, please give us a little bit of your bio as well.
Hello, happy to be here also. Thanks for having me. My name is Erin Charlins. I'm a counselor and professor at San Diego City College. I also serve our campus as our Umoja program coordinator. So we are committed to Black student success in our program. I also own and operate a coaching and consulting firm called Everyday Boundaries, where I use neuroscience to help people with their relationship challenges and also develop better boundaries in their lives so they can have better relationships. So that's what I'm bringing to the space today.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. So as was mentioned, we'll be discussing mental health and wellness. This month is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? The month of May. In specific, we'll be looking briefly at a concept called MEES, M-E-E-S, mundane, extreme, environmental stress, and the stressors that come from, our environment. In order to kind of bring that theory a little bit more into context, I want to play a short clip for everybody to see. Let's keep our fingers crossed that all this tech will work, but minute and a half clip to kind of give us some context and some background on the theory and the concept of MEES, mundane, extreme environmental stress, from its creator and co-founder or co-creator, Dr. Grace Carroll. So give me 1 second, I'll share my screen and then we'll get into hearing from our panelists. 1 second here. Okay, here we go. Everybody can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Alrighty, here we go.
One of my mentors, Dr. Grace Carroll, wrote a book, and it's called Mundane Environmental Extreme Stress. And so the basic premise is that because we have a love for Black people, when we see someone getting pulled out of their car, it's as if our cousin or our brother or our sister has been discriminated against. And so we have this stress that emerges from knowing other people are experiencing oppression and are being discriminated against.
We coined the concept of mundane, extreme environmental stress. And mundane because it happens every day, but it's environmentally induced, Mundane, extreme, it's environmental, but bottom line, it's stressful. It's stressful to Black people. And not only to Black people, it's stressful for those who identify with Black people. I feel as African Americans, we're in a somewhat extreme environment. The mere fact that we've had to have all the protests about just police killing of innocent young Black boys and girls, I don't see anyone who can possibly say we live in the same social, political environment, or the impact of those environments are the same for us as African Americans. I really wanted to pursue this notion of Mies, because I felt at least naming it and having a word for it and understanding it would allow us to navigate it better.
Okay. So that short clip is from the film Black Voices from the Ivory Tower. And again, the concept of Mies, mundane, extreme environmental stress, and the stresses that come specifically, as was mentioned, to Black people and those that identify with Black people. Again, this is the Black Faculty Table Talk, where we are discussing our unique experiences. And so I'll start with you, Mercedes. Just that short particular clip. I know that that concept might be new to each of us, and that's why we brought that clip to the forefront. But what does that mean to you when you hear that or see that or introduce this concept of Mies, and how does that intersect with what you do in the mental health and wellness space?
So in hearing that clip, for me, I guess I just think of the systemic oppression, discrimination that us as Black faculty can experience on a weekly or daily basis, right? In the classroom, the broader campus environment. I think of, my experiences with microaggressions on campus, and in the work I do. It's really making sure always, no matter it be faculty, a student, staff here on my respective campuses, just making sure I provide space to support mental health, space and listening to those conversations when you have to run to a colleague's office, right? To just process what happened. Hey, can you check, can you read this email to see if I'm processing it correctly? And so for me, and hearing this, again, just thinking about the microaggressions, the discrimination that we experience, and then the work that I do as a faculty member on campus, making sure that I am holding space for my peers if necessary, and when I can, if I'm not exhausted and if my cup is not full.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kendrick, I see you nodding your head. It looks like you are either in agreement or you've been there. Could you explain how this intersects with the work that you do?
I'm laughing because me and Mercedes used to work out of the same office. So when she talked about running down to the coworker's office to see, look at this, am I seeing this in the right way? Like that, I remember those conversations. And it's such a real thing. And the space that I get to navigate now is around actually doing a lot of trainings around diversity, equity, and cultural responsiveness. And so helping people see how these dynamics play out in real time in their professional experiences, and trying to get a sense of, how do we navigate this? That's why I'm actually in Marin County, is doing some of these trainings. And what came up yesterday was this lady brought up the dynamic of the emotional labor that women have to do in relationships. And for me, I navigated that over to when we're dealing with these type of dynamics. It's often the people of color, or those that come from marginalized communities, that have the emotional labor of helping everybody else move forward and understand the dynamics that oppression and racism have. And so whose responsibility is that? But you have to be willing to look at these dynamics. So when I'm looking at this, I'm appreciation of being able to have the language for people to be able to see and talk about it, because I think until you have language, at times people don't really understand how to connect with it. And so this gives a really good, clear example of what the experience is. So when we talk about, looking at social media or looking at these dynamics on the news and how it impacts us is constant. And so it's something that we're just constantly dealing with.
Thank you. Thank you. And for you, Dr. Aaron, being so deeply entrenched and involved in Umoja, among other things, but definitely in terms of the Umoja space and how that is a specific lane for African-American students and those that also want to join or want to be a part. How does this concept or theory of Mies intersect with the work that you do?
So first I'll share, I love that video clip, and I'm noticing I'm having this like visceral reaction that I can feel because I'm thinking about 2020 specifically is what's coming in my mind, being in the pandemic and watching all that we saw, George Floyd and all of that consecutively happening on our screens, and then having to have our own experience, but also supporting our students. So we're navigating our way through all of that. And then, you know, I'm trying to support my students through something that I'm trying to figure out, and also being asked on campus to speak to what's happening nationally. So that's what's coming up for me, the stress I felt and the overwhelm I felt watching that clip. And one of the ways I guess it looks like for me is on my campus is, you know, we don't have the resources that we need to serve students. I hear the stories consistently of, you know, housing insecurities, food insecurities, and we do have some resources on campus, but of course there's gaps. So I'm dealing with those students on a day-to-day basis in the gaps. And so it reminds me of growing up, you know, always trying to make something out of nothing, you know. And so here, what it looks like is we have some resources, but there's a gap. We're always trying to do a lot with very little, you know. So I'm hearing the stories, and the stress piece comes in for me is I don't have all of the resources to help. And so day in and day out, I'm trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents with these students. And it's again, I'm noticing what's happening in my nervous system as I'm talking about this. It's stressful day in and day out to do the work and not have the resources. So that's what's coming up for me in the spaces that I'm in.
Okay. So that clip, for lack of a better term, I'm not a clinician myself, but it triggered something, right? It's a triggering clip for you?
Yeah, and I agree with Kendrick. I mean, having the language, it's like all these things, oh, I'm seeing right now. And I'm seeing in a way that I'm activated because yes, it's bringing me back to some experiences that are very real and live in my body. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So 2020, what we know, what was kind of the context of that particular clip and what we saw, 2020, that was 3 years ago, or coming up on the anniversary of George Floyd's situation is about 3 years ago in about 2 weeks or so. And so that still has some, still makes a reaction for yourself almost 3 years removed from it. And with that being said, with that being the case, how do you think that affects your, you know, you're saying your nervous system, and also you study neuroscience? How do you think that affects, you know, what's going on in the mind and the body for our students, and then also for, you know, those faculty, classified professionals, et cetera, that still may be affected by that in the same way?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's not just 2020. These aren't isolated events, you know, and I think even all the things that are happening across the nation, locally, you know, there's this interconnectedness that we all have. And so there's not really healing that's taken place. You know, we're still, it's like the Band-Aid keeps getting ripped off. There's new wounds, new injuries. And so, yeah, it's very impactful. And I'm so glad we're talking about Black mental health specifically because, you know, as Helen mentioned, we do this because we love our students. This is heart work. This is passion work. And so if I'm not taking care of myself, my wellness, my mental health, you know, I don't show up the same when my nervous system is dysregulated, you know, when I don't have capacity to think in the same way, which means I'm not coming to the table, the classroom meetings where I'm advocating for my students. I'm not bringing the same edge, the same sharpness, nothing about my system operates the same way and in the most effective way when I have a dysregulated nervous system, when I'm, you know, when I'm triggered, you know, even right now in this space, I'll get back down to a space where I have a little more capacity, but you know, it's difficult to, your brain just doesn't even fire the same way. So absolutely our students experience that, you know, the way I show up in the classroom looks different. So yeah, I've got to manage that. That's my work. That's our work, is to manage that as educators. Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to add to that, Erin, and say, like how, you know, we talk about COVID long haul, right? And how COVID has this impact on you, and it can exist for, you know, years to come. And so it's the same thing with stress. Stress can have, you know, an impact, a long-term effect on our mental health. And so when we think about housing insecurities and food insecurities, that's immediate, right? We think about the immediate need, and sometimes we forget like the long-term impacts. And so that's like high blood pressure, that's diabetes, that's heart disease, and still, you know, problems with mental health. And so when I think of COVID long haul, I also think of long haul in terms of mental health as well.
All right, thank you for adding that too. That makes a lot of sense. And we still don't know what the effects of COVID or of the ripple effects of COVID will be, right? We're still kind of in it and really just, you know, grasping a little bit of what the ramifications could be. So thank you for adding that. Kendrick, I'm curious for your perspective in discussing this about, you know, the mental health, and the anxiety, the triggering, et cetera, and then having to go into classrooms or having to go into campuses and show up still. What level of responsibility do you believe that our institutions hold for mental health and well-being, particularly for Black faculty, Black classified professionals, Black staff, if any?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a little bit different because I don't work directly in education in the same way anymore. Well, actually, I do teach one class, but the majority of my experience is training and working with social service professionals, which is still an institution nonetheless. And so one of the reasons why I lean into that is because of the ripple effect of being able to work with people who are providing services for you know, diverse communities. And, you know, you're getting some of everybody. And I think it's the institution's responsibility to be able to equip the personnel, the faculty, to be able to work with populations, diverse populations, and understanding what the experience of the people that work within those populations are going through, especially, you know, the people of color, the Black practitioners in these spaces. Because one of the things I hate to go to a training and I'm telling them how to show up for the community and the families that they work with, but the organization is not showing up for them in the same way, right? We talking about being culturally responsive or trauma informed, and their supervisor is not approaching them in that way. They're causing them the microaggressions that make them want to call off work to prevent them from working with the people that they need to work with. And so I think it's very much a responsibility that, you know, the institution has. And let's get clear that when we say institution, it's not some building by itself. Like, the institution is the people that make up the institution. And so, you know, the people in decision making positions, you know, being responsible and accountable, that's the institutional accountability, to be able to create an atmosphere for Black instructors, Black practitioners, Black faculty can show up, can, you know, air grievances, can maneuver through the different challenges that show up. Like, that's a place that needs to be created by the institution, but the institution needs to believe in that for it to actually take place. Because we can't say we believe in that, and then once somebody actually raises an issue, then, well, y'all keep that over there. We got some other things to do with that's gonna come before that. So just we're gonna come back to that. Just hold that position right quick.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that. So not only saying it on paper, putting it on paper, but being accountable, holding institutions to be accountable, and showing up for that particular type of work. And does an institution like that exist currently? Can we point to some examples where institutions like that exist? And we don't have to answer that question. We can just, you know, if you can't answer, just if you say yes or no, just blink one time for yes and blink 2 times for no. Okay, we don't have to necessarily answer that on camera. All right. But no, all jokes aside, let's take a step back for a quick second. All right, if you can recall the types of experiences or the things that brought you to wanting to explore mental health and wellness, in particular professionally. Can we start there? Because oftentimes, this is part 2 to this, this is not something that is talked about. Mental health and wellness is not something that is or was talked about largely among the Black community, right? So what led you to wanting to go into this particular field? I know that to some degree we're all in higher ed, but the focus on health and wellness, what led you to that? And we'll start with you, Aaron, and then we'll go round robin again.
So again, I work in education as a counselor and professor. And so what brought me to this work really is I was an Umoja student back in the day. So I had Black counselors, Black faculty pouring into me. And so here, full circle, I'm doing the same exact thing that was given to me years ago in community college. So I watched the way that our counselors supported students. I remember being a student and the counselor pulled me out of class and said, one of my classmates was housing insecure and she was losing her place to live. Her mom had kicked her out, all kinds of circumstances. And could she live with me and my family for a little while? So that's what I grew up with. That's the model that I saw in education. It looked like that. And so that's in part why I'm here. And the other part of my work I do is boundary and relationship work. And that comes from my own journey with being, nearly boundaryless in some areas of my life and watching how that impacted me and led to burnout in almost every job that I've ever had. How it led to challenges in my marriage, not being able to stand up for my own needs. As a Black woman in different spaces, I worked in the private sector and human resources for a while. And, just feeling like I had to do all of that and be all of that and more and shine in every area, exhausting, And so giving myself permission to be me, to be messy, like we all are a little bit, so really it's my own work, my own challenges, my own stuff that's brought me to this work.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Mercedes, about yourself, what led you to this world of health and wellness?
This world, health and wellness. So I grew up in the foster care system in Los Angeles County. I emancipated at the age of 17 and moved out to San Diego. And I've been here ever since. So what was supposed to be 4 years is now year 17. But in my experience in the foster care system, I had social workers and I had therapists. And during that time, we know in social work, a lot of things you do is mandated, right, by the courts. And so my therapy experience was kind of different. I would go to therapy, talk to someone, and then leave. I remember my first time being honest in therapy warranted a butt whooping when I got home. And my grandma came from the perspective of, what happened in this house stays in this house, and you told that white woman our business. And so I became an adult and I'm doing life and I'm working with youth. And in my pursuance of licensure, I saw there weren't therapists and clinical supervisors that really looked like me. So that was a reason. So one, my personal experience with therapy being very limited. And then two, going through the licensure process and not having one clinical supervisor or not one Black professor in my master's program for social work that really looked like me. I was hired at Helix High School in 2007. And during my time at Helix High School, I saw that there was a need. And then just wanted to be that example and be reflective of the clients that I work with. And so being a Black therapist is so important to me because I always tell my clients, very informal, safe space, right? But I want therapy to be something that's honest and that's safe. I was in therapy 17 years of my life, and it wasn't until I became a young adult and realized that I wasn't really doing therapy. Everything I was doing was very surface level. Whatever I could do to get through a 50-minute session, that didn't get me a butt whooping when I got home because I was being honest about what was going on in the household, right? And so again, personal experience and just wanting to be reflective. I remember in doing telehealth, my first Black client and her mom and her having tears on the screen because we looked like each other. That matters. And being a therapist and having a therapist, it's hard to find people who are reflective of you. That's important. It's culturally important. And so that's what led me to mental health and where I am today.
Excellent. Okay. So personal experience. And Aaron, you mentioned also, you started off with Umoja, now full circle, personal experience brought you back. Okay. Kendrick, yourself, like, how did you get into the health and wellness world yourself?
I was kind of like the joke, and I was my mother's first therapist. So growing up in an environment where I just remember one day we walked out to the trash can, and she's having this conversation with me, and then midway I'm just thinking I'm like, dang, mama, should you be talking to me about this? And but in that space and just kind of realizing my community, right? I had an uncle that was, addicted to drugs, who eventually went to prison. I had another uncle that was trans, that I was actually in prison, and died in prison. I had another uncle who got jumped one day coming home from work at wee hours of the morning, had his jaw broke, and never quite recovered. He was never quite the same from that. So from seeing these type of dynamics and having this experience of navigating community and seeing the dynamics that other students are going through, I think my heart was just kind of always there to be a listener, and just through my own growth and development, wanting to get a deeper understanding of, why people respond the way they do. What is the social impact of, identity and navigating these spaces, and how all these things come together. And so I was fortunate enough, this might have been, God was at work, because I was a radar technician my first 6 years in the military. And then I was trying to do my shore duty, and as a radar technician, they only give you like security. I ain't nobody security. So I was trying to switch to another role, and initially I applied to be a legalman, but they didn't accept my application for whatever reason. And the next option that came was a substance abuse counselor. And so I did that application and I got accepted. And so that's what ultimately pulled me into this field. And so when I got out, I continued to stay a part of the mental health field and work with nonprofit organizations, with homeless and runaway youth, DUI programs, foster care. And so it just kind of continued out of that. And me and Mercedes actually went to grad school together for social work. And initially I didn't plan on, being a therapist, because by that time I'd done quite a few years in the field in a very direct service way. So I was burnt out. And then at some point I started working with an organization. I was, let me go ahead and get these hours. The world needs more Black male therapists. So that was my wave. And then I started doing it, and I was like, I'm not doing this for me. So I'm not sure if that needs to continue, and decided to take a different approach, which would be working with the professionals who would go on to serve the communities, because I felt like there would be an exponential impact if I'm working with more people to help them, equip them with how to work more effectively with Black families in particular. So I chose to go that particular route because I also recognize there are other ways in which I show up directly for community, for Black males in particular, in regards to mental health, and particularly through my artistry. So let me go ahead and swing over here a little bit. So this new album that I'm working on is called Clean Pain, based out of Res Dominican's. He wrote My Grandmother's Hands. And it's talking about, this is my version of clean pain in terms of processing a lot of social trauma, social experience, and personal dynamics and relationships, and finding myself. And so to be able to do that and carry that into different spaces through art is another way that I try to lean into the mental health dynamic, because it's a very present thing. And so me is always, finding ways to fit it. I'm gonna fit the art in places, and I'm gonna fit the mental health and the social justice in places. And so I think it's also a space where we always feel like we can only say this over here. It's like, nah, I don't want you to take this training and only apply it to your workspace. Like, you can't be racist at work if you can be racist at home. No, do this at work and do it at home. So let's keep it everywhere.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Kendrick, I want to stay with you for just a quick second. So a couple things that I heard you mention, your uncles and how kind of seeing them go through ups and downs, it impacted you. And then also you mentioned the world needs more Black male therapists. So from the experience with your uncles and then you being able to verbalize or recognize that the world needs more Black male therapists, why do you think that there is a stigma, particularly for Black males, around therapy or accessing health and wellness services? Or is there, do you think there's a stigma? I shouldn't project. Do you think there's a stigma?
There definitely is a stigma, but I think it also depends on the company you keep and the place that you're at. I know I get to be a voice, in my circles, in my space of folks, in terms of bringing up the subject matter and like, bro, you have you thought about this, or have you read this book, or something like that. But just thinking back to where I was actually, getting my hours, as like some of us don't have the space. Some of us don't have in terms of, the community around us of people who think like that, who recognize like, oh, I'm dealing with some mental health challenges, right? Sometimes, our trauma in terms of a Black experience is very normalized. And so we grow up not knowing that, actually you probably shouldn't be having this experience. we just recognize, well, this is what granny did, this is what mama did, this is what daddy did, and we just keep doing it because that's what we know. And so when we talk about this stigma, it's not necessarily even a stigma in the sense of it just being a stigma. Is sometimes we don't know any other way, and we've been able to get through. So that's what we lean into.
Okay.
And so how do we allow ourselves to have a different reality? Because it's just like with education. When you start getting educated, then it's like, oh, hold up, you over here trying to act white. And it's like, nah, bruh, I got different levels of who I am that can be expressed in different ways. So I'm leaning into that, and you tend to, if you allow yourself to have that space. But sometimes we got to be able to see what's out there, and that's why it's so important to have examples, because then you can see what's possible. You can see the new possibilities of different roads you can travel, different careers you can go into, different ways that you can show up.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in there. Can I jump in there too?
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I know a lot of times Kendrick's talking about the company you keep. I know for many of our students, the first time they start thinking about mental health or knowing that it's an option is community college. Well, we're starting to normalize all this stuff. And, my students in particular are taking personal growth. We're teaching life skills. We're talking about the heart. And so, many of them, it's the first time where they felt like, oh, this is actually normal and okay too. I also think that for some of our students, therapy, wellness, you're accessing a different part of yourself, a softer, more vulnerable side. And that's not always safe. Mm-hmm. That's not always safe to be showing up like that, mm-hmm. So that's new. And for our students to understand that, there's spaces where I can be soft, it's safe. And then I can also go back and be who I need to be and how I need to be over here too. So I think that I think Kendrick hit it. It's a discovery, and a lot of times it comes with some of the company that you keep and some of the opportunities that you step into. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Can I jump in too?
Absolutely.
So on the same lines, Kendrick and Dr. Charlins. For me, and hearing that, Kendrick, I coined my little phrase and saying normalized chaos. And so I didn't know that I had normalized chaos until I was doing intimate and personal relationships with people as a young adult, and seeing that, cursing someone out is not a way to get your needs met. And it's like, what do you mean? You're going somewhere with a aunt or grandma, and they say what they need to say, and boom, the person makes it happen. And it wasn't until I was a young adult and learning like, hey, people will show you humility if you show up the next day, but that's not how you get your needs met. But when you normalize chaos and normalize, getting your needs met in a particular way, that's what you know. I think with our students too, a lot of times we ask, what we can ask of them is usually things that's never been done for them before, right? And so I give the example of working with young parents who have kids in the system and wanting them to work really hard to get their kids out of the system, right? Because they were a product of the system. And how do we break this generational thing? And I remember a clinical supervisor sharing and saying, hey, you're asking for something that's never been done for them. And so you're asking them to fight, to reunify with their children, but nobody fought for them and they stayed in the system for 18 years. And so you're asking to love on them and to pour into them. Well, if they feel like no one's loved on them and poured into them, what does that even look like for them? And so sometimes as a counselor, as a professor, I have to step back and think sometimes and in my expectations. And if I'm asking something that's never been done, and you'll meet people who say, well, you know, my mom or dad never gave hugs. And so I don't know how to be emotional. I don't know how to be with the mushy and the gushy stuff because that wasn't done for me. I'll give another example. Growing up in the household, it was 20 of us, 4-bedroom, 1 bath. And my grandmother didn't ask about school and what we learned. It was coming home, taking your school clothes off, putting on play clothes, getting your chores done, getting your homework done, and it was wake up, repeat. And so now having a niece, I get a chance to ask, how was your day? What did you learn today? And I remember my sister being, you know, so many questions. Why does she need to tell you? And I'm like, hey, that wasn't done for us. No, my grandma didn't have the capacity to ask us how our day was going, right? So thank you for letting me add my 2 cents and going off on a tangent.
And I'm coming right back. Too, because Mercedes is making me think about something. I'm thinking about my classroom spaces too, where, you know, I've got students in their 30s, 20s, 18, 17, and even my older students too, they're hungry for, we start talking about boundaries and conflict and, you know, wellness and mindfulness, and they're eating it up. It's like, literally, they're like, can we stay on this topic more? You know, this isn't stuff that we're learning outside of these spaces. It's not. And sometimes I question myself, should I talk about this? Like, this feels kind of, as I've been talking about it for a while. And I remember the basics, the foundational stuff. A lot of our students just, they're not exposed to some of these concepts. And so they're getting that for the very first time in college and community college. And so what a privilege and opportunity we have to be, this is life-changing stuff. This is generational changing stuff that they're learning in our spaces. And so it's such a beautiful opportunity that we have to teach. Yeah.
What I appreciate, what Erin would also spoke to was the need for the community that is created. Because when you start pulling out these dynamics and new levels of skills and boundary setting and stuff like that, you can begin to ostracize yourself from the dynamics that you grew up in. And then it's like, well, who can you go to? Because it's easy to say this stuff, but when you start putting it in practice, like you realize like, oh, I grew up in a toxic environment. Like, how can I expect to really succeed? And then you gotta like, where am I gonna go? You know, where can I go to? And so it's a lot to, for our students to have to manage when they're navigating these spaces. And so how we show up as faculty and staff to be able to support them, well, we have to create this space for ourselves within these, you know, institutions of how do we support ourselves? Like, there's Umoja has its own, faculty support system, if you will. It might be a little bit more unofficial, but those conversations that happen, in the context of the institution that's how I think faculty support ourselves in these spaces, is because we have to have that created as well. So we have a space to kind of go, decompress and whatnot, so we can show up for the students as well.
Right. You know what, Kendrick, I'm glad you mentioned that. And this is for each of you again. So how do the wellness providers stay well themselves, particularly in these, institutions or in these environments where there's not a lot of support for health and wellness? You're expected to produce, you're expected to come to work and be in tip-top mental, physical, and emotional shape every day. Like your dog can't die, your child can't be sick, you yourself can't catch COVID, right? How do the wellness providers themselves stay well in this? What did Mercedes say? In this this chaotic environment? You used a particular phrase. I'm sorry, it slipped my mind. Mercedes.
Normalized chaos.
Normalized chaos. In this normalized chaotic environment, of higher ed? How do the wellness providers stay well themselves?
In the words of Lauryn Hill, I get out. No, no. Aaron, you have something more about the space. I'll let you go. Okay, because you still in it. I say for me, recognizing that sometimes I recognize when folks, professionals are in the institution, they can be very bitter. Like that's just an awareness. Like and I'm like, man, well, like you okay, bro? Like you good? And it's like because they're in the midst and they're fighting, they're trying to show up for students, and they're dealing with all these things, and it's a very challenging space to be. But I do know just from my experience of like having faculty that you can relate to and kind of process things with. When I talk about self-care, it's interesting that a lot of times we think about self-care, let me get a manicure, let me get a massage, these things that you do ever so often. But when you take care of a pet, when you take care of a parent, when you take care of a child, that is day in, day out. So for me in this space is like, what am I doing day in, day out to make sure, I got the capacity to show up for myself and others. And so that's creating community, that is, having boundaries, doing things that bring me joy, that bring me energy, that feed my soul. So I think those are the type of things that we have to lean into to create the space to show up.
That's
Aaron,
exactly.
please expound on that, Aaron.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Kendrick. What's been big for me, and again, I'm thinking about 2020, I'm thinking about the pandemic, how I got through that, again, having to show up, being on Zoom with students. I do career, academic, and some personal counseling as it relates to, kind of their overall success. And being on Zoom during the pandemic, up close and personal with our students and all that they were going through, and then having my own experience was a lot. And what got me through that and what gets me through is community. And I'm thinking about the show Girlfriends right now. I'm dating myself probably, but my Black girlfriends got me through that 2.5-year period when I was home, and they get me through and sustain me through all the stuff that I go through. And I appreciate, again, thinking about that video, being able to name what's happening and having it validated, being seen in what I'm experiencing. There's healing in that. Like, I'm not tripping. This is actually what goes down. So just being able to be seen in our stuff and the stuff that's really happening for us, there's something healing about that, where I can just go, oh, there's an exhale that happens, and there's room and there's space created in that exhale. Mm-hmm. And I also think boundaries, it's such an interesting thing, boundaries. We all have them, whether or not we name them, or whether or not we know what they are, we have them, and we find out when somebody brushes up against it, we're like, dang, but recognizing that, when a boundary is brushed up against, and honoring it, developing a relationship with my own body and my own system is one of the ways that I stay well. This week I put on an event yesterday, our Emoja end of the year celebration. And I remember waking up yesterday, I got about 3 hours of sleep, says the boundaries person, right? But I got about 3 hours of sleep preparing for this end of the year thing. And my sleep's been kind of off. And I woke up yesterday and I literally had the conversation with myself. I was like, my window of tolerance, is very narrow. My capacity is very narrow. I'm aware of this. And so I literally had that dialogue going in my head. And the purpose of that was just, now that I have that awareness, how am I going to move? There might be some no's. I might not let somebody in my office. I might say, what, I literally have about 2 minutes. But when I can develop that relationship with myself and my system, I can take better care of myself. So I think those are some of the things.
Okay. Thank you. So I heard a little bit of community building, a little bit of what we would consider, I guess, mindfulness, right? Knowing what's going on internally. And in addition to that, getting more sleep, right? More than 3 hours. At least get 3.5 if you're going to,
Try.
That's the start. No, I'm just messing with you. Mercedes, as a person who was in the health and wellness field, right? How do the health and wellness providers stay well themselves? And you have some, interesting takes on it, I'm sure. Please.
Yes, yes. So I stay well by honoring the space that I'm in. It's been a long time coming for me with boundaries, and I think Kendra can attest to that. The grad school conversations, the professional conversations, the on the phone conversations. I lost my mom during the pandemic. And so I was back and forth to LA during the week and on the weekends. And it wasn't until her really getting sick and me being a caregiver where I had to implement boundaries. And implementing those boundaries, I wasn't aware of how many people had access to me, because just implementing the boundaries, the pushback I got, and how I was received for implementing those boundaries told me that way too many people had access to me in a 24-hour period. And so just by being a caregiver, I was able, to implement those boundaries because I had limited time. But in the last 4 years, I would say just honoring the space. And I would give an example. When Trump won the election, I did not go to work the next day. I was not well. And if I need a self-care day, I give myself permission to take that self-care day. I'm a woman of faith, and my pastor shared a long time ago to always have a wise counsel, a president, a vice president, and those people that you can just go to, and that's your tribe, your vibe, everything. And so I have a group of professional women, and we all do different things, and they are my wise counsel that I can go to for, emotional support, spiritual support, professional support. And also during the pandemic, I birthed 816 Culinary Therapy. And 816 is actually August 16th is my mother's birthday. So tribute to her, because cooking was introduced to me in her kitchen. And so another way I stay well and I stay calm is through culinary therapy. And again, that's just using mindfulness with my relationship with food. And then just using the cooking and the process of food to really reduce my stress, improve my moods, and increase my self-esteem. I'm a single Black woman in San Diego, and during the pandemic, it was the first time where I had to literally check in with myself and say, are you okay? And not only are you okay, as a Black single woman here in San Diego, do you have everything you need? Not what you're doing for others. Do you have everything you need? Do you have your basic necessities? Do you have your essentials? If the governor said, hey, we're closed down tomorrow, you as a single Black woman, not taking care of anybody but yourself, do you have anything you need? And that was the first time in 30-something years where I had to ask myself that question and look out for me. And then it was during that time where I was bored, and not only bored, my mental health was up and down with my mom being sick. And I challenged myself every week to just try a new recipe. And it was something I looked forward to with anything I had in the cupboard to get me through a week of the pandemic. And so what was something I could do and being at home every week to get me through something. And it was cooking. And through that process, it just became therapeutic for me. And it challenged me to, start my private therapy practice. And I thought if I could heal myself in the kitchen and just using my hands and my heart, I know I could heal the world, and helping others use their hands and their heart through the art of cooking and this non-traditional therapy approach.
Interesting. Love it.
I was going to add also therapy. Like I didn't mention that is how this wellness person stays well. And every other week, and I pay out of pocket, and it's a lot of money because it's that important to me. That is my investment in myself. And I want to show up for my students, but there ain't no way unless I'm taking care of me. We always talk about put the oxygen mask on you first, can't pour from an empty cup. And it's so true. I'm a fraction of me, and I'm pretty dope, like fully, when I'm supported and I have what I need, but I can also be just somebody who's not what my students need when I'm not taking care of myself. And so therapy is my investment, and it's been my investment at least every other week. I've done some life coaching in there as well for myself. So therapy is absolutely, that is my, I have to have that person in my life.
Excellent. Thank you.
I want to co-sign that. And Mercedes also, kind of really brought to me like the music for me. I think I've been a writer for a number of years, but I probably didn't really get into producing till maybe 2015, 2016. But when 2020 hit, I got to a whole nother level. Your boy's nice. And so I say that to say it really became a piece of expression. And so, for example, a couple of pieces really came out of 2020, and this is one of them. They say Black history is a white mystery. This Black plight is a white mystery. Well, they say American history ain't Black history. This Black plight is a white mystery. We've been screaming for years, but they didn't want to listen. Plenty well-meaning folks with the wool on their eyes. They say we reckless, but they reckless with our lives. Welcome to the party. We've been here for a while. We've been living in the trauma. You was living in the fantasy. Marching for our lives. You was playing on the beach, dying in the hospital, dying in the streets, dying in the church. All we wanted was some peace. How some of y'all get it, but the rest of y'all didn't. We've been screaming for our lungs, but y'all didn't want to listen. Just a glimpse of our reality brings tears to your eyes. You think this life's a struggle. Imagine life with a child. We hope that times like this was long ago. Shouldn't be a crime to leave out my front door. I wish I didn't have so much anxiety about the people I love that look like me. Cause I got a target on my back or another foot on my neck. Justice shouldn't be so hard. All we ever wanted was a little respect.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful.
And I
So-
always say therapists need therapists. As a therapist, I always like to practice what I'm preaching. And I would never sit in a session and say anything and promote anything and empower my clients to do something that I wouldn't do. And so, yes, therapists need therapists.
Okay. Well, there it is. Thank you. Thank you for confirming that. And Kendrick, thank you for the sample. I feel like we need more of that, but I know you probably got that somewhere for purchase or for download or something like that. So please make sure to let us know where we can hear more.
Get a whole workshop. I mean,
okay. Hey, we'd love to have that and experience that more for sure, because that was at 32 bars, perhaps. That hit me right in the heart. And so with that in mind, look, I'm just going to also say this, Mercedes, since he gave a sample, we're going to need some of those culinary samples too, specific to the Pipelines to Possibilities crew.
Yes, lavender lemonade. I have mindful empanadas. I have passion pizza. Whatever we need for your symptoms, culinary therapy has it.
Yes, indeed. So Mercedes, let's stay on that. Lavender, lemonade, passion pizza, and mindfulness minestrone, and all those different types of things, right?
That's a good one. I may use that one now.
Hey, I need my 15% once that hits the market. How does what we eat, what we drink affect our health and wellness, particularly mental health and wellness, the things that we're consuming and what we're eating and drinking on a day in, day out basis?
Well, I always say brain food is so important, and we should always be feeding our brain with our nutrient-rich foods that can impact our moods, our energy levels, and ultimately our cognitive function. We know when we look at processed foods, refined foods, all the things that can lead to. And so really having a healthy diet is going to be impactful for our mental health. When I worked in the high schools, I remember starting work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I would see students, tracking into school with hot Cheetos and a Monster drink. And I would always say, I wonder at what time, sorry, the light goes off. I wonder at what time in the day they're going to crash. It is 8 a.m. and they are walking into high school with a Monster drink and a bag of hot Cheetos. And so usually by second or third period, you have students crashing, right? That's processed foods, that's refined sugars, that's unhealthy fats. That's going to lead to inflammation. That's going to lead to just other negative impacts on our health. And I always say eating brain foods to promote our brain functioning is going to be important. So eating our vegetables, eating our fruits. It's hard. We stress, and when we stress, we tend to go towards comfort. Comfort for me is ice cream. And so I have to learn, how do I dodge the pecan praline and the butter pecan, right? For something healthy. And so instead of ice cream, I'm going to maybe dark covered blueberries, or, dark covered pomegranates, blueberry, acai. And so again, something that's gonna improve my brain functioning, but it's gonna improve my mood and give me energy. Hot Cheeto is my comfort food. Make it extra hot, right? But when I eat hot Cheetos, I feel good temporarily. That's something that's gonna temporarily make me feel good for 30 minutes. And then the next minute, I'm back to feeling depressed. And so when we look at food, and when we look at depression, again, we're going towards comfort, and that comfort is going to be things that are high in sugar, things that are processed, things that are high in fat. We are going to the drive-through and we're getting that French fry and we're inhaling, waiting to exhale with it, because it gives us a temporary feeling and a temporary high. But being intentional about our fruits, our vegetables, our whole grains, and again, what we give to the brain is going to improve our overall functioning. So when I'm meeting with clients, and depending on their symptoms, I like to promote and bring something that's going to help them holistically. And so if we had a session and you were stressed and stress were your symptoms, we would get in the kitchen and we would make lavender lemonade. So that looks like literally making your own lavender syrup from scratch. So culinary therapy, we do everything from scratch, because we like to get in it and use our hands. We know when it's made with our hands, it's made with love. But we're making lavender syrup. We're adding our water, our lemon, to give us that nice, refreshing lemonade. As much as we would love a Monster drink or something to keep us going, we're dodging that to, again, give our brain something that's necessary. And so it's overall really choosing healthier foods that are going to have a positive impact on our mental health.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that for us. Dr. Aaron, I'll come to you. As the Umoja counselor and a person, again, who is entrenched in the Umoja just statewide organization, oftentimes the expectation, whether that's self-imposed or it's external, is that we operate intrusively, we go the extra mile, we take on more than just the counselor role. You're now a surrogate mother, you're a surrogate aunt. But how does that work in the context of needing boundaries, professional boundaries, personal boundaries, and how are you able to kind of create some of those boundaries, knowing that you lead with the heart?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. That's a tough question. And in these roles, boundary lines are blurred when you have a program that you operate and you're counselor, professor, and coordinator. We're delivering things to people's houses during the pandemic. We're after hours, on the weekend, on Sundays. Umoja just isn't we're not a 9-to-5 program. We're not a program. And while you're at City, these are lifelong relationships, and that's real. Just the other day, one of our students he just got his master's degree and he was interviewing for a position in counseling. And so he hit me up on a Sunday and said, "You got a minute?" It was more like 90 minutes, but he needed some prep for his interview, so that's my family time. He's also part of my family, so those lines do get blurred, but I look at it as I'm one of the few secure and like really safe relationships sometimes that my students have. where they know there's a space where they're going to be seen, they feel safe, they're going to be supported, they're going to be challenged. I'm not looking for a whole lot in return, just effort. And so that's really important to me. And so I've got to be well for them. And I also want them to understand that, like, I feel like in all of my interactions with my students, I'm modeling like what a secure relationship looks like in every interaction, whether we're in conflict together or whether I'm championing them, whether I'm supporting them, whatever that looks like. I know that they're watching me and they're seeing, oh, okay, this is how Black professionals do it. They're watching everything that I do. And so I also want them to understand that relationships have boundaries. And so they know, a student just a minute ago came and she just opened my door right before this webinar. And I said, I'm really going to need you to knock, like just it's the smallest things. But it's important for me that they see what boundaries look like, and they see that boundaries don't have to be something that's mean or nasty. We all have them. And if I'm not having them, our lack of boundaries, they mess with our relationships, all of them. When we don't have boundaries, our relationships are at risk. Our relationship with ourselves. I know the times when I don't have boundaries, I don't feel good because I'm probably raggedy. I'm running around with no sleep and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not showing up well. But also, we start to get into resentment, people tramping on our boundaries, right? And so, that kind of stuff starts to mess with our relationship. So it is in my best interest to hold those boundaries and to model for students what boundaries actually can look like, and that they don't have to be mean or rude or, and it's just part of life that we have them. So I navigate them carefully and I navigate them intentionally, and I actually verbalize them. We talk a lot about boundaries in my spaces with students. They're not able to, and as Kendrick said, we also talk about the other side, so they're seeing it modeled through me. And we also talk about the part of it where now what happens? I'm implementing these boundaries. Mom is pissed, so we talk about all that. So yeah, it's blurred sometimes, those lines. And I'm very intentional and explicit about what boundaries look like and how necessary they are in my spaces with students.
Erin, I'm going to email you. I need a session.
Yes. I was just thinking, Mercedes, yes. I need a culinary thing for my students. I'm not even kidding. That would be amazing.
Yes.
We'll talk offline.
Okay. I need a session. And hearing you say that, and you said accommodating, I always like to share with clients, never be accommodating to the point that you are resentful, because you have been accommodating and this person's like, I didn't ask for that. You wanted to be, you accommodated that. And so now you're filled with all of this resentment because you've been accommodating. And then the other side of it, getting comfortable with those being upset and being mad. I think my friend groups are finally on board with my do not disturb. But before it was a thing, you live on do not disturb. And now the joke is, if any meme comes around and has anything to do with do not disturb, they're sending it to me. And so it's like, yay, you get it. And it's something we can all laugh about it now, right? But before it was like, I'm on do not disturb. Can you add me to your favorites? There's a trick to get past do not disturb. And it was a whole thing, but now people get it. Do not disturb. We get you. We see you. We will honor that.
Phones have boundaries too. And that's important. And on that point about boundaries, Erin, could you provide one boundary, one way to honor a boundary that we could implement and walk away with, something that we could take and, a tool that we can use on our boundary journey?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many things, and boundaries are so personal. There's not like a one size fits all boundary. That's the thing. They're so personal. But what I'll offer there is, boundaries really are about us, right? Not other people. It's about what we're going to do, what we need. And what I'm sitting with right now is this idea of internal boundaries, checking in on our own. One thing we could do today is check in on our own capacity, like literally right now. What do I have capacity for today? And maybe our capacity is fairly limited. And so if I have that awareness that, you know, for the next 3 hours, I'm really just kind of slammed. With that awareness, I can start to create, you know, what we're calling boundaries around that. I think, again, just that idea of internal boundaries and being aware of our own capacity and checking in on, you know, what am I up for? Mind, body, spirit, emotionally, what do I have capacity for? And just honoring that. Our own internal boundaries are some of the best boundaries that we can set. So that's a little vague. If we could just remember to check in on our capacity today and each day, I think that is huge. That's huge, and that's boundary work.
Actually,
Responding accordingly.
I'm going to give an example of kind of one of those that you're talking about. Because as a people pleaser, recovering people pleaser, you know, a lot of times I would do stuff for the sake of others. And I had to get to a place of asking myself, am I doing this because I want to, or am I doing this because I feel like they are going to feel some type of way if I don't? And that right there let me know whether or not I should or should not be doing something. Because I'm asking myself, do I have the capacity? Can I do this? Do I have the money, etc.? And if I feel like I have to do it, then 9 times out of 10, I probably shouldn't be doing it, because it's not coming from a place that I can actually do it. I'm only doing it because I'm fearful of the repercussions or how they might see things, et cetera, et cetera. And that means it's not coming from a genuine place. So I'm not being genuine with myself.
You're making me think of, I love that example, recovering people pleaser here. Another boundary is just, again, this is internal boundary work. It's just pausing, right? Because I've got that too, Kendrick. I'm like, in a meeting like this, somebody asks something, okay, you know, but just allowing myself that space to check in. Hold up, Aaron, you know, yeah, just giving myself that space to pause. You know, that's also boundary work, is learning how to pause and not jump in and say yes all the time.
Yeah, I worked with a coach once, and she told me, she was like, if it ain't hell yes, hell no. So it was like, real words have never been spoken.
I was gonna say, in doing the clinician work during the pandemic this semester, I unintentionally checked out, just with committees and just different things on campus. And it wasn't on purpose. I just unintentionally checked out. I couldn't keep up with meetings. I'm in a Zoom meeting, another meeting's happening, and I knew it was a result of not implementing boundaries and saying no. And yeah, I could honestly say I unintentionally checked out on just the different committees I'm on campus, because so many were created during COVID, right? So many DI committees and different things. And yeah, I checked out. So just like every college diversity statement went away on their website, I kind of did the same thing. But it's my hope in utilizing the summer to refresh, rebuild, and hopefully help as much as I can during the fall semester. But I will say that time during the pandemic and showing up outside of my role on campus to support faculty, staff, and students resulted in me just unintentionally checking out and missing committee meetings and missing things, to the point where I said, hey, I'll pick up in the fall if the committee's still around. Thank you.
All right. This is the last question for you all. I think you all have said, this has been great. And you all have said some great and wonderful, amazing points, and made some great, poignant statements. This last question, as practitioners, how can we best support our institutions in elevating the voice of mental health, and especially Black mental health? How can we underscore the need and necessity of Black mental health, at these campuses or in these institutions, in these spaces in which we work at, where in a lot of cases, we're few and far between?
Repeat that again.
Yeah, say it again.
Okay, got you. As practitioners, how can we ensure that our institutions support and elevate the voice, the needs, the concerns, the necessity of Black mental health, particularly since, you know, there's few of us in these spaces. There's, you know, we're not in mass in terms of critical mass at a number of our campuses. So how can we help our institutions to understand the need to prioritize Black mental health and wellness in the spaces in which we work in, and the spaces in which our students come to learn and, you know, engage in?
I think we've given a lot of, not a lot, but we have Black student forums and things like that. You know, we've had many of those, especially during the pandemic. We haven't given that same attention, except for a little more recently, to Black faculty and our needs, because I think if we create more spaces like this where we can be honest about our experiences and what we need, I think that would illuminate, you know, the need for how our institutions can support us better.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a trend, particularly on my campus, in this direction.
Okay.
I don't know if it's not always that the right people who can make decisions like that are at the table or at these kind of meetings. But I think more spaces where our voices are centered, like really intentionally, is part of the work.
Okay. All right. Excellent. I would wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
I would say too, looking at our behavioral and mental health services on campus as a whole, and what that looks like, and who are the interns, and who are the staff. I think for mental health services on campus, we really, you know, promote it for our students, but it should be promoted as a resource for our faculty and staff, especially assisting with, you know, our student interactions. And in doing that, it can, you know, promote this widespread of, you know, fostering our social, personal, and academic environment. And so not only are we, you know, empowering our students to access services on campus, but we're also empowering our faculty and staff too as well. And then giving the opportunity, like Erin mentioned, and space to even let that be a thing on campus, right? Like having a Black faculty, staff, and association. I know I have it at another campus, and the connection I feel is very different than being on my other campus. We don't have a Black faculty staff association. And so I know there, you know, we can talk about anything, process anything, but really when you look at behavioral health on campuses, what does that look like? Who is the behavioral health director? Who are the employees? Who are the interns? And then campuses looking at retention rates and students and the different things that they're going through. We've implemented, you know, housing programs to handle housing insecurity, food insecurity. That alone right there should bring some kind of attention, right, to administration. But I really think pushing mental health services on campus to be a resource for faculty and staff as well as students can be just as a help.
Excellent. Great point. Great point.
Well, there's the quote that says, "Show me where you spend your time and your money, and I'll tell you what you value." So I'm not sure what to tell them what to do, but I know if they truly value, then I know the ways that they can show it, and they can show it, you know, through where they put the time and the energy and the money into, you know, supporting programs, to supporting the faculty in spaces, to giving space to do things where it's not an afterthought. I think sometimes, you know, oh, we got this coming up, we need to throw this together, and that's like you've been planning this other thing for months.
Yeah.
And so, or even having the faculty in certain positions to do certain things. So for me, I think that's just kind of the lens I look at. If let us not have to tell you what, like, if you value
Right.
like you value like these other things, we don't have to tell you to do those things, right? You already know it's a part of your mission, it's a part of how you show up. So include us into that aspect of your mission in terms of how you show up.
And be intentional with our supportive service programs like Umoja. I feel like those programs should have an identified clinician in behavioral health. EOPS should have an identified clinician in behavioral health. CalWorks Care should have an identified clinician in behavioral health. And so when we're meeting with students, yeah, we're going to do the personal, but sometimes it's a lot of personal and you get a little academics. And so if they had a person that they could go to personally, yeah, they could still check in personally with us, but rather taking, it being a 30-minute check-in, it's condensed down now to 5 or 10 because they have that supportive service and behavioral health where they can go to. They have a face, a name. Umoja could refer out. EOPS can refer out to support our students. Nowadays, you go to behavioral health, it's kind of hard to get an appointment. Our healthcare system using family healthcare centers and services, sometimes that's hard. And so students really rely on behavioral health services at the community college level. And so even identifying clinicians for, special supportive programs would be a huge help.
Excellent, great point. Is mental health and wellness or behavioral health in this particular case, Mercedes, the next or the future for our California community colleges? Is it the next, I don't want to say the next big thing, but is it the next area that should be focused on?
It's long overdue. We are on borrowed time, most definitely, because when time and time on a daily, weekly basis, when you're meeting with our students, they are dealing with so much. First-gen students, DACA students, unhoused students, our formerly incarcerated students. There should be time, money that is put into behavioral health services on our campuses, and it should be a campus-wide comprehensive partnership where it's I see you, we have these services, and I see you, and you are welcome to access these services. And not only are you accessing them, they're equitable to everyone. And so if Khalid came to behavioral health, he could indeed meet with a Black male therapist, right? Accessible and equitable. That's another thing. Our students go to behavioral health and they don't see people who look like us. And so, yeah, I can sit down and schedule an appointment and talk to someone if it's pressing. But if I didn't feel welcomed in that initial contact, and if something felt off and there's a disconnect, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to go out the door, and I'm not going to seek the services that I need. And so, yes, our chancellor, the state, money should be put into mental health services. So it is a comprehensive partnership on our, on our campuses.
Thank you. I agree 100%. Looks like we're at about time. I know that, we could continue this conversation forever, but I want to, firstly, on behalf of P2P, thank you all for our panelists for being here today. Thank you for giving us your time, your talent, your tremendousness. It just goes without saying how important the work that you do is on your local campuses and in your local institutions, yes, but for us as taking your example throughout the state. And so this will go to a larger audience, a statewide audience. And so we are just really grateful for you all being here and wanted to just say thank you on behalf of Pipelines to Possibilities program.
Thank you all for the amazing opportunity. Dr. Charlins, Kendrick, an honor to share space with you all. And then something I can share with you all, and Sasha, when I was in Africa this past fall, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Akua, amazing person. And he actually shared an African-American psychology bibliography, because when we are doing therapy and mental health and we're looking at theories, it's always from that European lens, right? And so a whole African psychology bibliography of African-American psychologists. So I would be happy to share it, but that's something I've been using to just reframe and how I do the work.
I think we all need that resource.
I will share it.
We can all use that. Thank you. Thank you. Sasha, Dorinda, thank you both. I don't know if you all want to close the room out. See, Sasha shook her head. Okay, that's all right. Well, again, I don't want to be a ball hog. I know this is NBA playoff season. I don't want to hog the ball, but thank you all again for being here. Thank you for, giving your time to P2P and to our young people the way that you do. Thank you for showing up as you. And this has been another edition of the Black Faculty Table Talk, brought to you by Pipelines to Possibilities. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you soon. Peace.